myself online and righteousness in the culture for all these years. Donna Hughes is president and CEO of Enough is Enough. And we're going to talk a whole lot about that tomorrow, because that's a story in and of itself. Going to talk about the fight against obscenity and the impact that it's having on our children. But Donna is here with us today. You were there in that audience when Dr. Young was talking. Thank you for being with us today. You flew here from Washington, D.C. with your husband, Jack, and I knew you many years ago. It is such a thrill to see what God has done in your life and continues to do that. And thank you for opening the most painful era of your life. As a matter of fact, it continues. You've just recently been on television. Tell us what you've been doing.
Okay. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, Dr. Dobson. I'm just honored to be with you and your team. So thank you. Yes, we did come in from Washington, and just recently, in fact, there's been a major motion picture made about that season in 1987.
With Gary Hart.
Yes.
Who was running for president.
He was then, exactly. And I have said on some recent TV shows that I've done that the movie ends where the trauma of my life is just beginning when the Hart campaign released my name and identity to the National Media Corps. And I was actually thrown to a feeding frenzy and really eaten alive for
How old were you?
I was 29 years old. And this was a time that it was the first time the mainstream media went tabloid. So no one really knew what to do. There were no experts because it hadn't happened. And I was the young woman in the middle of this whole thing. And
they vilified you about every way it's possible.
Absolutely. There was a caricature that formed about me very early on. The first news stories my mother actually liked. They said, the New York Times said beauty, brains, and talent. She had it all. Mom thought that was really nice, so she put it on the refrigerator. And then by the next week, it was bimbo, home wrecker, and then it was, kept going on to even prostitute and things like that. And I really didn't have any rights, and I lost my job. I had a lot of national commercials that were canceled, and to be perfectly honest, my entire world fell apart. And as you heard Dr. Young say, I describe my 20s up until that point as my prodigal 20s, when I began to take little left turns. The catalyst of that was when I lost my virginity when I was 22, when I was date raped. And it wasn't until many years later when I met Dee Jepsen, who was the founder of Enough is Enough. In 1994, she talked to me about the harms of pornography. And one of the things she said is that it promotes the rape myth. I said, what is that, Dee? She said, well, that when a woman says no, she really means yes. And I had heard those words from the man that took my virginity at that young age, and I've went, aha. Now I know why God's called me to this effort in 1994.
Donna, beauty is power. You had a lot of it. You had a lot of power, but it was captured and utilized for other purposes, and you were the victim of it. Tell us about how you became acquainted with Gary Hart. How did that episode occur?
Well, that is actually a very long section in a book
and we
that
don't
I'm
have
writing.
That much time. Summarize it.
I will just say it was a random, by chance meeting, and he wasn't running for president at the time. I didn't know who he was, so I called my parents. I certainly didn't know he was married. And then that weekend became the Bimini trip. He announced he was running for president 2 weeks later. By then I knew that obviously he was a married man, and I chose to see him one more time. And that's when I was set up by two girls I thought were my friends, who betrayed me, called the media, who then followed me, and the whole scandal happened. So there was a lot of betrayal in my life by people that I trusted at the time. And like I said, I felt that I had lost everything that I had had up until that point. And that's how God got my attention, because I did lose everything. And my grandmother and my mother and others around me said, Donna, don't make any decisions until you get your life straight with the Lord. And so I did. and I came back to the Lord. God used that devastation in my life to bring me back to Him.
Are there any linkages or at least similarities between you and the story of Monica Lewinsky and her affair with Bill Clinton, in the sense that she was exploited? She made some bad choices too, but she was taken advantage of, and her life just came apart. Yours did too, didn't it?
Well, it certainly did. In my situation, yes, there are some similarities, but there wasn't any woman who had come before me who had come out of a scandal of that magnitude with credibility. And I was determined, with God's help, to be the first. And so I chose to take the high road. I chose not to exploit my notoriety, even though I could have vindicated myself from all the